Good evening. You are now tuned in to Reaching Your Potential, the weekly podcast about health, wealth, business, relationships, and becoming the very best version of yourself. Your podcast is hosted by yours truly, Darlene Scott, CEO and founder of Bliss Life Coaching, where we take a holistic approach to transformation and success. I can be reached at d.scott at basic-bliss.com. Please email me any questions regarding relationships, business, life management, stress management, and I will respond to your email within 5 to 7 days. Sometimes I will even answer your email question live on the air. I look forward to hearing from you. Let's get into it tonight. Good evening. You are tuned in to Reaching Your Potential, and this is your host, Darlene Scott. This evening, we're going to be discussing soul ties. This is one of my favorite subjects. And it's one of my favorite subjects because a lot of people do not understand what soul ties are. And I deal with a lot of clients in my private practice, and I'm starting to see that a lot of the problems that they're having now is because of unhealthy soul ties. So this is going to be a 2-part radio show. This evening, we're going to talk about what are soul ties, what are some healthy soul ties, what are some unhealthy soul ties. And then part 2, the next podcast will be about breaking or severing unhealthy soul ties. We all have soul ties. It's nothing wrong with being one with someone or knitting with someone, but it is something wrong when that relationship becomes the source of pain, frustration, feelings of guilt, or low self-esteem. So let's talk a little bit about soul ties in general and how they're formed. Soul ties are formed through relationships. Relationships are essential for human survival. Many years ago, psychologists believed that people needed food, water, and shelter to survive. Studies confirm that we as human beings are programmed to connect. We need more than the basic essentials of life to survive. We need connection. We need touch. We need relationships. Children, infants can develop all kinds of diseases and disorders that affect the immune system simply by not being coddled enough, not having that human connection, failure to thrive. If an infant is not touched, coddled, and soothed, the infant is lacking something. So a basic need is our need to be connected to other people. So we have to have relationships. We are social beings. Soul ties are formed through relationships. Relationships are not always just romantic relationships. Soul ties can be formed by interacting with someone that triggers an extreme emotional response. And that being said, that means that it does not necessarily have to be a long-term relationship. Soul ties are formed when you interact with someone that triggers an emotional response in the brain. And there's 2 different types of emotional response that interacting with someone can trigger. You have stress hormones in your body. So if you interact with someone who is negative, or you have a relationship with someone who impacts you negatively, your body is going to produce more stress hormones. The stress hormones are adrenaline and cortisol. So what happens is your body gets into the fight or flight state when you're interacting with this person. This fight or flight state, it is something that is built into us as human beings. It's an innate response to a threat. And this response serves us very well. It serves us well, especially if you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, that at one time, this fight or flight system would kick in when we were being threatened by large animals or when there was a storm coming. We knew that we either had to fight or we had to flee from the perceived threat. However, when you're in a relationship with someone, your body is in a constant hyper arousal state where you feel that fight or flight is kicking in, even though the threat is gone. So when you're in a negative relationship, I should say. So when you think about it, we as human beings are not programmed to constantly be in a state of tension. So when you're interacting with someone and they are making you feel negative feelings, you are feeling emotionally threatened, and that nervous system triggers these stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. The other hormones that can be triggered just through relationships and just by interacting with someone, the other hormone is oxytocin. It's also called the love hormone. Now, oxytocin is a very important hormone that is produced when women are actually breastfeeding their infants. Oxytocin is also released when we are cuddling or snuggling up to someone that we care about, when we're kissing, when we're hugging. So it is actually the bonding hormone. It's a hormone that's released when there is an emotional response in the brain that is pleasurable. So I'm talking to you. I enjoy the conversation. Our relationship is great. My brain is producing oxytocin. So these kind of emotional responses, whether it's the stress hormone being produced or whether it's the oxytocin being produced, this forms a soul tie or an energetic connection. Also, you have to take into consideration that intimacy and closeness does not always involve intercourse. So soul ties can be formed between mother and child, between parents and their children, between teachers and their students, between husbands and wives, between pastors and their congregation, the flock that they lead. So soul ties are not always associated with intimacy as far as physical intercourse. Relationships where performance is being evaluated form soul ties. So you are the student and I am the teacher. We have a connection. We have a soul tie. I am judging you or grading you. I'm rating your performance. And in doing that, I trigger an emotional response. It may be apathy. Your emotional response may be, I really don't care what she thinks, but there's still some type of tie there. So soul ties are formed through relationships. And one important thing that I should mention is there's a lot of people out here that believe that you can have one night stands. They believe that you can have sex with someone and just walk away from it and not be forever impacted by that experience. What needs to be really understood is that when you connect with someone and you have intercourse with someone, there is a meshing of the spirits, so to speak. So your spirit is actually becoming one with someone else's spirit. So they have left an energetic footprint, if you will, on you forever. So we need to be careful about who we choose to lay down with, because that person has their own energy, their own spirit, and they're bringing it into the bedroom with you, and they're connecting with you. And again, if you can transmit something physically, you can definitely transmit something energetically or spiritually. We know that the HIV virus can be transmitted through sexual intercourse, and that HIV virus can cause your immune system to be depleted and not be able to fend off infections. So when you think about it from a spiritual point of view, you can download something from somebody spiritually or energetically. You create this soul tie that can compromise how you respond to relationships in the future, or it can compromise your view of yourself. So that's something to keep in your mind, that when I'm making love to someone, when I'm connecting with someone, I am essentially becoming one with them in that moment. So briefly, I want to go through I want to tell you a little bit about healthy soul ties, and we're going to talk a little bit about what are unhealthy soul ties. So some signs of a healthy soul tie is when you speak to that person, or when you're with that person, they're constantly pushing you towards your greatest potential. That is a very, very good sign that this is a healthy soul tie. So we're connected. There's these little imaginary or energetic cords that's connecting us. And when I talk to you, or when I'm around you, you transmit something positive into my spirit. You deposit something that elevates me, that takes me to the next level. You're pushing me towards my greatest good. So that's a sign of a healthy soul tie. Another sign of a healthy soul tie is you may feel invigorated, alive, respected, rejuvenated, and appreciated when you're around this person. Being appreciated makes you feel whole. It makes you feel like you're worth something. And if you're around someone who's able to make you feel that way, then that is a very, very positive sign. Another sign of a healthy soul tie is their memory brings a smile to your face. So when you think about that person, you start to smile. And I have a friend like this that I used to be around all the time. And when I was around him, we would laugh and we would joke and we would listen to music. And so when I hear songs that take me back to when I was around him, I smile, because we had this really deep connection and we both love music. And so when I think about it, I smile. Euphoria. That is a sign of a healthy soul tie. And then there is also the final thing that I want to mention is when you have a healthy soul tie with someone, it is easy to forgive them. A healthy soul tie with someone means not that there will never be problems, but it means that whatever problems come up, you find it easy to forgive them. Even when you get really mad at them, eventually in a few days, you find it easy to forgive them because the relationship is more nourishing than it is harmful. So that's signs of healthy soul ties. Another thing that I always like to focus on when I'm talking about healthy soul ties is, do I learn from this person? Does this person teach me? And when I say, does this person teach me, I don't mean formal education, sitting down with a book and saying, hey, did you read chapter 6? I'm talking about, does this person help me to know myself better? And that's just a great thing. So I also want to talk to you about unhealthy soul ties. And remember, soul ties do not have to be between a male and a female. The soul ties are between best friends. Besties have soul ties. And in the Bible, in 1 Samuel 18, it talks about Jonathan and David. And it says that the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and they were friends, and their souls were knit together. The Bible also talks about a man should leave his father and his mother and shall cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one in the flesh. So when a man and a woman come together in marriage, whether it's a Christian marriage or a secular non-Christian marriage, it doesn't matter. When they make that vow to each other and they devote their lives to one another, when the two people come together, there is a strong soul tie that is formed. The two become one. And when you lay with someone, you become one with them. Even if it's just for that moment, you've became one with them. So an unhealthy soul tie creates these energetic cords or psychic cords, if you will. So I'm connected to you where there's like these energy strings, one coming from me and it's connected to you. And we transmit feelings, we transmit energy through these cords because we're connected. We have this tie. In an unhealthy soul tie, one of the main signs of an unhealthy soul tie is, number one, the memory or the thought of the person causes you anxiety, feelings of worthlessness, or frustration. And if you've ever been in an unhealthy relationship, when you think about that person, you still get some of those feelings. Number two, a sign of an unhealthy soul tie is after you interact with the person, you feel emotionally and physically drained. How many of us have people like that in our lives? How many of us have somebody that when we talk to them, we're just like, oh my goodness, like what just happened? I'm on the phone with you for 15 minutes and I feel like I need to sleep for 15 hours because you drain me. How many of us have that coworker at work that when they walk in, everybody go, oh, or that classmate that as soon as they sit next to you, you go, oh, don't sit next to me today. Please, not you. Because they drain you. That's an unhealthy soul tie. And then number three, you have intrusive thoughts of the person during moments of silence, contemplation, or when trying to fall asleep. And this is the interesting part, is that when you're trying to relax yourself and trying to go to sleep, an unhealthy soul tie will mess with you. An unhealthy soul tie will cause you to think about the person when you don't want to. So it becomes an intrusive, invasive thought. It's like, get out of here. Why am I thinking about you? It's almost like emotional PTSD. So if you had a person in your life that put you down a lot or didn't show you enough love or attention, it can be your mom, it could be your ex-lover, it could be your best friend who betrayed you. It just seems like that creeps up on you at the darndest times. When you're sitting there trying to relax, you'll think about this unhealthy relationship. Number 4, your relationships lack trust because of the past experience with this person. The problem with soul ties is that if we don't cut that thing off from the root, if we don't make a conscious effort to sever that soul tie, if we don't do the self-work that is needed to cut that soul tie, what happens is the baggage from that soul tie and that relationship begins to spill over into your current relationships. So you may have had an experience with someone and that experience has molded you not to trust people, or that experience has taught you that people can be mean, cruel, inconsistent, judgmental, or unreliable. And you think that you're living your regular life and developing new healthy relationships, but as soon as you get really, really intimate with someone, instead of oxytocin being produced, cortisol and adrenaline is produced. That's your fight or flight response system kicking in. Why would you feel like you should fight or flight when you are being close to someone? That's because in an intimate relationship in the past, you've been hurt, and your body, your mind remembers how bad it hurt, and you go into fight or flight mode. Like, wait a minute, should I trust this person? Should I get close to this person? And it's a little bit of fear there. So that's another sign that you have an unhealthy soul tie. Number 5, you find it difficult or impossible to forgive the person. This may be the hallmark of an unhealthy soul tie, especially when it comes to abuse, infidelity, abandonment, things like that. If you can't let it go at all and you've tried, that says there's definitely an unhealthy soul tie there. That person has penetrated your mind and your soul, and in some cases your body. They have penetrated you to such a degree that you can't even soften your heart to forgive them so that you can be better. And remember, forgiveness releases you, not them. Forgiveness heals you. Forgiveness is about you feeling lighter, about you letting go, about you accepting their faulty perception of you, or about you accepting that what happened is actually in the past and you've gotten past it. So not being able to forgive someone is definitely a hallmark of an unhealthy relationship or unhealthy soul tie. So this was part 1 of this podcast. Part 2 of this podcast will talk about how do we sever these cords? How do we cut these cords, these unhealthy soul ties? And I'm going to talk about it from 2 different perspectives. I'm going to talk about it from a biblical perspective, but I'm also going to talk about it just from a regular, secular perspective. And I'm going to tell you some exercises and some tips, some things that you can actually do in the here and now to work on severing some of those soul ties. And I know that I feel 100% better because I've finally been able to cut some of the soul ties that I had with someone many years ago that was abusive and mistreated me. And I finally am to the place where I can say, you know what? I forgive you. And I'm getting better every day. I'm getting better every day with dealing with the abuse and accepting that it wasn't my fault. I didn't do anything to deserve to be treated like that. And I'm able to move on. And then I'm also nurturing my healthy soul ties. I have so many healthy soul ties, and I just thank and praise God. I'm just so happy that I have friends in my life and that I've had experiences with certain people that have made me feel so happy to the point where if I dig in my memory bank and I pull up one of the memories I have with this particular friend or this particular person, it will take my mood from being sad to being happy. And I'm just blessed to really have people in my life that I can call friends and to have experiences that I'll always remember, always cherish, and always hold on to. So I hope this podcast was informative this evening, and I really wish you all the best. Continue to nurture your healthy relationships, and next podcast we'll talk about cutting those unhealthy soul ties. Thank you and have a very blessed evening.